Hello friends, in this video I am going to brief about AWS Lambda Function. AWS Lambda is a cloud computing serverless service. AWS Lambda allow us to run a code without thinking about server. It is a kind of pay-as-you-go model service which is known as serverless service. AWS Lambda Function allow you to run a code without thinking about servers. You can run your code in any languages, .NET, Go, Java, Node.js, Python, Ruby, or any custom runtime you are able to run on your Lambda function. So I will going to brief about Lambda function in this video session. AWS Lambda function is a cloud computing serverless service. By using Lambda function, you are able to run your backend application code or a event driven application code in any different languages. For creating Lambda function in AWS console, you have to search here a Lambda function. Once you open the Lambda console, this is a AWS Lambda console. From here, you are able to see your existing Lambda function list and you are able to create a new function from here. When you click on create a new function, you have a different options. Either you can use existing blueprint or a container image, or from scratch, you are able to create a Lambda function. Let me for now create it from scratch. We can give any name to our function, my Lambda function, say for example. And when you create a Lambda function, you need to select the runtime on which particular language you want to run your code in Lambda function. So you can either select your specific preferable runtime, .NET, Go, Java, Node.js, Python, Ruby, or any custom runtime. So for now I'm selecting Node.js. And here different options regarding the architecture, and also by default it is creating a new role with basic Lambda execution permission. You are able to use any existing role or define your own policy template. In advanced setting, we have this function URL. You are able to enable the Lambda function URL so that you are directly able to call Lambda function by using that URL. So these are the different options while creating the Lambda function. So let us create that. So we are here creating our first Lambda function in AWS console. So this Lambda function, once it is created, based on your choice runtime, you have to write your code. So here is a basic code created in Node.js. This is a handler function, and this is a simple basic code created here for in the Node.js with hello from Lambda function. So this is a one my Lambda function is created. So here you can see this is a console of the Lambda function. So by default this is a code is created. So here you are able to see the code, whatever code is added. Then in this configuration you are able to see the package size, your runtime, your handler details, and in this particular case, you are able to test your function by using this test event. Like you are able to pass the input and click on test, so those event will pass here in the handler function and it will execute. So when we run test function, we are passing this input event that will goes into handler function event, and when we run test it will give us output like whatever we have in our code. So here status code 200 and hello from Lambda function. So we executed this Node.js code, and here we get this status code 200 and hello from Lambda function as a response while we test this. So you are able to write your any kind of business logic, like a when you are building API, then you have to write your logic to get the data from the database and response in a JSON format or whatever way. So this is a standalone Lambda function. You are able to use this Lambda function as an event driven approach. So this Lambda function should call when someone call any API through API gateway, or a when someone uploads some file on S3 bucket, and then we are able to trigger the Lambda function. When someone push the event to SQS, then we are able to call the Lambda function. So we are able to call Lambda function event driven way. So we are also able to link this Lambda function with the triggers. So when we want to link this Lambda function with triggers, there are a lot of options from where we are event driven way we are able to call the Lambda function. Like either we link with the API gateway. So whenever someone call the API gateway endpoint, it will trigger this Lambda function. So these are different options like Alexa, or even when someone upload a file to S3 bucket, automatically this Lambda function will trigger. When someone push some event to SQS, at that time this Lambda function will poll those event and trigger. So this way, either even we are, when we someone push event to Kinesis or MSK Kafka, then it will also trigger this event. So there are a lot of source options to connect with the Lambda function. So this is a source option. So this Lambda function won't work as an event driven way, and this Lambda function will not charge whenever it is standalone and not running. It is only charged whenever it is running. So it is a pay as you go serverless service, and we are able to do event driven link with these Lambda function, like either with S3 or a SQS, SNS, or any other services API gateway. And another thing is, when we run these Lambda functions, we have this logs also generated. So in monitoring, we will have the logs generated for that Lambda function. So we are able to see the matrix here for the invocation and throttling and all other things, different metrics. And from CloudWatch, when we click on CloudWatch Logs, it will give us a logs for that particular execution of the Lambda function. So we run this Lambda function one time. So here we see the logs of that particular Lambda function. If we want to print anything in this Lambda function, then it will um, it will show those things in the logs when we run it. Say for example, we are writing some console log and deploying. We are able to deploy here. This way, if we have any changes, we are able to deploy it. And if we run test, it will have a this hello from Lambda function. So now if we see the logs again in the CloudWatch, we will have a more logs added in the CloudWatch. So here you can see new logs added. So in this log, we are able to see log test, right? We added that is in the console. So that way we are able to debug the Lambda function. So in our code, we added a console log test. So we are able to see those lines here. So that way we are able to debug the Lambda function, and we are able to deploy. If we have a local package, we are able to upload zip file over here to deploy the Lambda function, or you can upload on S3 location when we have a bigger Lambda function through the cloud formation or any SAM or a serverless framework. We are able to do deploy Lambda function as an infrastructure as a code way also. So this is a monitoring way. We are able to do traces in X-ray for the Lambda function configuration. We are able to see, like, this is a general configuration. By default, the timeout is 3 seconds for the Lambda function. Maximum it is a 15 minutes, and memory size is by default 128 MB. And so these are we are able to change according to the our needs. So trigger, right now no any trigger setup, but as I informed, we are able to trigger this Lambda when API gateway call or any SNS or SQS event push. So this is an event driven way to call serverless services. Permission, this is a IAM role created by default for Lambda function whenever we create a Lambda function. But if we want to do some other operations, like from this Lambda function we want to call some SQS or a SNS or any other services or a database operation, then we need to give additional permission to this IAM role. Otherwise we can't able to do those operations, so this role is important in that case. uh, Also, this is a function URL. We are able to create a function URL also for this particular Lambda function to directly execute it without API gateway. Environment variable, we are able to define environment variable, those we are able to use in our code. So this is regarding that environment variable, store some values with the Lambda, and that will we are able to use in codes. And VPC, also we are using putting Lambda into VPC sometime when we are doing database operation in RDS operation by using Lambda function, so that is also matters when we are doing network based operation. And also this is a recently new things like monitoring tools. We are able to activate detailed stressing and profiling things on the Lambda function to debug the your code application code more way. Concurrency, this is a like we have like account concurrency of 1000 limits. So this is a when we have a like multiple execution on event driven application, it will run concurrently. We are able to do asynchronous execution also of Lambda function as well, and there are two retry attempts by default. um, and another thing is like uh, versioning, like Lambda we are able to create a Lambda function versioning. And also another thing is in code level, we have this layers also, like we are able to add a layers when we have to use any libraries, or you want to develop your own libraries and reuse it, then you are able to add a layers to use those library in your function code. So this is how the Lambda function is having a lot of capabilities to build a serverless event driven application. So say for example you want to build any API, simple API to fetch data from database, then in that case you need to spin up your API gateway. That API gateway will link with the Lambda function, and whenever API gateway endpoint call, that will trigger the Lambda function, and that will connect the database and get the data and return those data. And say for example someone upload a file to S3 bucket, at that time you want to trigger the Lambda function, and you want to process that file and store those data into database, or you want to convert a from text file to CSV file and put in different folder. So that way you are able to link this S3 bucket to Lambda function, and destination also you are able to link in your Lambda function. So this way you are able to create your Lambda function and able to do your different operations by using Lambda function. So this is a brief overview about Lambda function, and you are able to use different runtime, and you are able to write your business logic according to your application needs. So thank you for watching this, and share this video with your friends which is absolutely beginner for the AWS cloud and Lambda. Please like, share and subscribe my channel for more technical content. Thank you so much for watching this.